We're joined by a global affairs analyst, Collins Nweke. Mr. Nweke, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Lekon, for having me.
I believe you've listened to the president, dear Bola Tinubu, talking to the president of France. For you, what specific opportunities might arise from this visit, looking at economic partnerships that Nigeria is hoping to solidify with France, particularly when you look at the critical areas, agriculture, energy, innovation?
There are a couple of areas that one needs to focus on to have a sense of, what informed this, state visit. And then that would then lead you to an assessment of, which opportunities are looking in the corner here for Nigeria, but also for France. It's for France to determine, what the opportunities are. Now, the first anchor, of course, is Nigeria foreign policy. The so-called 4D Renewed Hope foreign policy doctrine of the Bola Tinubu administration. Now, under normal circumstances, you glean from that foreign policy document what the priorities are for Nigeria. But let's pause a while here to ask ourselves, how did this meeting come about? The meeting came about because, Emmanuel Macron, President of France, invited, President Tinubu for this state visit. So, which means that they are on the demand side of the meeting. Now, why is that? The reason is very simple. Like you mentioned in your intro, France's influence in Africa is waning very seriously. They have been, under enormous, attack from, various, African states, not only for the neo-colonial, history, but also some of the current day practices. So France is obviously looking for ways, initiating a strategy to begin to rebuild relationship with Africa. And so it is not surprising that, it chose Nigeria as the dominant economy in Africa, but also the most populous and perhaps the most influential in Africa, to start that, process of redefining Africa's, its partnership with Africa.
So, Mr. Nweke, so this means that this relationship that we are hoping to see get strengthened has more to benefit France than it would benefit Nigeria, the giant of Africa, because we've seen Francophone countries shift away from, France, so to speak, but then we're seeing these pivotal country being the synergy for France.
Absolutely, Lekon, spot on there. Now, I was coming to that because obviously, like I said, France is on the demand side of this meeting. So, which means that it is of critical importance to them, to France, to rebuild relationships with Africa. Now, where does Nigeria see opportunities here? Nigeria see opportunity here in the fact that France is standing weak. Weak in the sense that it needs Nigeria as a very strong ally to, in that process, in that strategy of rebuilding relationship with Africa. Now, there are a number of things in that regard that are of critical importance to, President Tinubu. For instance, President Tinubu has always highlighted the fact that, the international systems as it is, or as they are constructed at this moment, actually does not favor Africa. Macron is a very, very critical, very, very important, voice in the global arena, but more importantly in Europe. So I believe that now that, to use an important balance, that now that, Macron is being held on the ground, it is an opportunity for Tinubu, President of Nigeria, to further that agenda in terms of extracting very, very important concession regarding, for instance, United Nations Security Council and strengthening Africa's voice in that, but also on issues of trade and so on and so forth. And one can only hope that he uses this opportunity to, actually drum home those issues that are of critical importance to not only Nigeria, but Africa. After all, he's the, chairman of ECOWAS at this moment.
So we've, over half of Nigeria's population living below the poverty line, and these benefits that you're hoping Nigeria will get from France, how realistic and how soon do you think we should be expecting these benefits to begin to manifest when you look at probably the potential French investments that might come to Nigeria by the reason of this so-called friendship? How soon?
Yeah, well, these things need some gestation period, but you can classify it in two, categories. So you have the low-hanging fruits that President, Tinubu can actually zero in on immediately. Take, for instance, enhancing youth development exchanges, university collaborations, research, R&D, research and development, boosting things that are already, running, that are already existing. Over the last year, France has pumped 10 billion euros into Nigeria by way of investment. Now, with the private sector playing an important role, they can actually stimulate that and you get immediate result. Now, on the longer term, having spoken about the low-hanging fruit, on the longer term, you look at issues around, climate change, for instance, and actually helping Nigeria in the energy transition that is required. France has the know-how, they have the R&D, and then they probably have, 1 or 2 billion to invest in that area. This is an opportunity to get that on the track, and long term, that will benefit Nigeria in achieving the energy mix that the country needs so very desperately to be able to crawl out of this incessant power outage and so on and so forth.
Okay, so assess the fact that it's taxpayers' money that is being used for these travels by the president and the vice president for these meetings to strengthen bilateral ties with different countries. The president has visited over 17 countries since inception, since he came into power. And we've seen a lot of conversations around growing the Nigerian economy, partnerships and all that. How are we so sure that these travel investments will translate into economic growth for Nigeria when you look at the policies of Nigeria and discover that some multinationals have actually closed shop? The manufacturing sector is angry and angling and complaining. And it seems as though the economic situation is harsh for the business environment?
Well, you see, we say in Nigeria that, to cook soup requires money. Now, investment in traveling around the world to be the #1 salesman of the country is, of course, of critical importance. But I get your question, Lekan, and that is the investment worth it? What about Nigeria's return on investment? Like I said earlier, some of the returns on that investment could be felt immediately. Some has a longer, time gestation to begin to see the impact. Now, it is difficult to convince Nigerians that, some of these trips, are actually delivering the expected result in terms of the resources invested in them because of the hardship, that has permeated the country. Take, for instance, a year ago, people could buy a bag of rice for 30,000 naira. Today, it is 100,000 naira. You can't be convincing anybody who is in that situation that, things are getting better and that these trips are yielding results. But, I think there is a need for the president and his team, of course, to reassess some of the unintended consequences coming out of some of the policies that they had initiated, and do a rejig to be able to convince Nigerians that some of these trips are really worth the trouble.
Or even convince the investors that the president is trying to talk to, that the ease of doing business in this is Nigeria is valuable for them. Thank you so much, Collins Oweke, Global Affairs Analyst, for sharing your thoughts with us on the news.
Thank you, Lekan, for having me.